vast and unforgiving ocean holds secrets that are far darker than the deepest trenches found upon the seabed. Among the rolling waves and biting winds, there exists a legend that has chilled the blood of mariners for centuries. It is a story of pride and damnation that transcends the boundaries of time and death itself. Sailors from every corner of the globe whisper the name of a vessel that is doomed to sail the seas for all eternity without ever making port. This is not merely a folktale told to frighten young recruits, but a terrifying reality for those who have witnessed the glowing red sails on the horizon. The mere sight of this phantom ship is said to be a harbinger of doom for any crew unfortunate enough to cross its path. Imagine standing on the deck of a wooden ship in the middle of a pitch-black night with nothing but the sound of crashing waves to keep you company. The air turns unnaturally cold, and the smell of sulfur overpowers the salt of the sea. Suddenly, a strange red light pierces through the thick fog, revealing a ship that looks as though it has been rotting for hundreds of years. This is the Flying Dutchman, and its captain Hendrik van der Decken stands at the wheel with a look of eternal madness in his hollow eyes. He screams into the gale, struggling against a wind that never ceases. This spectral vision is the ultimate nightmare for sailors who know that seeing it often means their own death is imminent. The origins of this cursed vessel date back to the 17th century, during the height of the Dutch Golden Age. This was a time when the Dutch East India Company ruled the waves, and trade routes connecting Europe to Asia were the lifeblood of the economy. Wealth flowed into Amsterdam from the spice trade, but the cost was often paid in human lives. The journey from the Netherlands to the Dutch East Indies was fraught with peril, including disease and pirates and treacherous storms. Yet there was one captain who feared nothing and respected no authority, not even that of God Almighty. His name was Hendrik van der Decken, and he was known as one of the most skilled yet reckless commanders of his time. Hendrik van der Decken was a man of immense stature and a temper that could rival the most violent tempest. He was driven by an insatiable greed and a desire to make the fastest passages possible between Europe and the East. His crew respected his navigational skills, but they feared his wrath more than they feared the ocean itself. He was known to push his ship and his men to the breaking point, ignoring safety protocols and common sense in pursuit of speed. Rumors circulated in the taverns of Amsterdam that Hendrik van der Decken had made a pact with the devil to ensure his luck held out. These whispers followed him wherever he went, casting a shadow over his reputation, even as his wealth grew. It was in the year 1641 that Hendrik van der Decken set sail on what would become his final and eternal voyage. The ship was laden with valuable cargo, and the captain was determined to return to Amsterdam in record time. As the vessel made its way down the coast of Africa, the weather was favorable, and the spirits of the crew were high. They had no way of knowing that they were sailing toward a destiny that would trap them in a purgatory of salt and spray. The journey south was smooth until they approached the notorious Cape of Good Hope. This treacherous stretch of water where the Atlantic and Indian Oceans meet was known to sailors as the Cape of Storms. The Cape of Good Hope has claimed countless ships throughout history, serving as a graveyard for those who underestimate its power. As Hendrik van der Decken approached the tip of Africa, the sky turned a bruised purple, and the wind began to howl like a banshee. Most captains would have sought shelter in a nearby bay to wait out the approaching storm. But Hendrik van der Decken was not like most captains. He saw the storm not as a warning, but as a challenge to his authority. He ordered his crew to press on raising more sail when prudence dictated they should lower it. The wooden hull of the ship groaned under the immense pressure as towering waves began to crash over the deck. The crew begged their captain to turn back, or at least to heave to, until the worst of the weather had passed. They were seasoned sailors who knew the difference between bravery and suicide. But Hendrik van der Decken laughed at their fears and called them cowards. He stood on the quarterdeck, lashed to the wheel, drinking heavily and shouting obscenities at the storm. The wind tore through the rigging, snapping ropes and shattering spars. The terrified men fell to their knees in prayer, pleading for salvation. But the captain only mocked their faith. He declared that he would round the Cape, even if it took him until doomsday to do it. It was in this moment of supreme arrogance that the fate of the Flying Dutchman was sealed. According to the legend, the clouds parted not to reveal the sun, but to allow a blinding light to descend upon the deck. A figure appeared radiating a holy aura that contrasted sharply with the darkness of the storm. Some say it was an angel sent by God, while others claim it was the Holy Spirit itself. The figure commanded Hendrik van der Decken to turn back and repent for his pride. But the captain, drunk on rum and rage, drew his pistol and fired a shot at the divine messenger. He cursed the heavens and vowed that nothing in this world or the next would stop him. The bullet passed harmlessly through the glowing figure, which then pronounced a terrible curse upon the captain and his ship. Hendrik van der Decken was condemned to sail the oceans for all eternity with a ghostly crew of dead men at his command. He would never again step foot on land, nor would he ever find peace in death. Gall, which was a bitter bile, would be his drink, and red-hot iron would be his meat. The ship itself was transformed into a spectral vessel, capable of sailing against the wind and through the fiercest hurricanes without sinking. The once proud captain was now a prisoner of his own hubris, trapped in a cycle of endless sailing and suffering. As the curse took hold, the physical form of the ship began to shift and change before the horrified eyes of the crew. The wood turned rotten and gray, yet remained unnaturally strong. The sails became tattered and glowed with an eerie crimson luminescence, described as looking like blood in the moonlight. The crew members themselves were stripped of their humanity, their flesh withering away, until they were nothing more than skeletons and shadows toiling endlessly at their tasks. The Flying Dutchman vanished into the mist, leaving only the echo of the captain's maniacal laughter ringing across the turbulent waters. From that day forward, the ship became a legend that terrified sailors across the globe. For years after the disappearance of the ship, stories began to circulate among the maritime community. Sailors returning from the East Indies reported seeing a strange vessel off the coast of the Cape of Good Hope. They claimed that the ship appeared during the worst storms, sailing effortlessly into the teeth of the gale. When other ships hailed the vessel, the crew of the Flying Dutchman would remain silent or let out unearthly wails. Sometimes the spectral crew would attempt to lower a boat to send letters to the passing ship. These letters were always addressed to people in Amsterdam who had been dead for many years. Accepting these letters was considered a fatal mistake by the superstitious sailors of the 17th and 18th centuries. It was believed that taking the letters on board would transfer the bad luck of the Dutchman to the receiving ship. Captains would order their men to steer clear of the phantom vessel and to ignore any attempts at communication. Despite these precautions, the sightings continued and the legend grew. The Flying Dutchman became the most famous ghost story of the sea-inspiring operas and novels and paintings. But for those who spent their lives on the water, it was far more than just a story. One of the most chilling aspects of the legend is the specificity of the sightings recorded in ship's logs. These were not hallucinations of dehydrated men drifting on rafts, but detailed accounts from respected naval officers. In 1835, a British ship reported seeing the Flying Dutchman in the middle of a severe squall. The captain described the phantom ship as bearing down on them with full sail set despite the hurricane force winds. Just as a collision seemed inevitable, the ghostly vessel vanished into thin air, leaving the British crew shaken and terrified. This encounter was merely a prelude to the most famous sighting of all. The most well-documented encounter with the Flying Dutchman occurred on July 11th in the year 1881. The witnesses were not uneducated deckhands, but members of the British Royal Navy, including a future king. The HMS Bacchante was sailing round the tip of Africa with Prince George of Wales, who would later become King George V on board. The young prince was serving as a midshipman along with his brother Prince Albert Victor. The night was clear and the sea was calm, which made the sudden appearance of the phantom ship all the more unsettling. At 4 o'clock in the morning, the lookout on the HMS Bacchante reported a strange red light shining in the distance. 13 men in total witnessed the phenomenon, including the officer of the watch and the two princes. In the ship's log, Prince George wrote a detailed account of what they saw. He described a strange red light, as of a phantom ship all aglow, in the midst of which light the masts, spars, and sails of a brig 200 yards distant stood out in strong relief. The description matches the classic folklore of the glowing red sails that signify the presence of Hendrik van der Decken. The sighting was incredibly vivid, and the witnesses watched in awe as the spectral ship crossed their bow. However, as the Bacchante approached the location where the vessel should have been, there was no trace of any ship. The horizon was clear, and the sea was empty. There were no other ships in the vicinity that could account for the lights or the distinct silhouette of the brig. The encounter left a profound impact on the young prince and the crew, reinforcing the belief that the Flying Dutchman was real. But the horror of the sighting was not limited to the visual spectacle alone. In the folklore of the sea, seeing the Flying Dutchman is always a bad omen, often predicting death or disaster. The crew of the HMS Bacchante waited anxiously to see what misfortune would befall them after the encounter. Later that very same morning, the lookout who had first spotted the red light fell from the crosstrees on the topmast. He crashed onto the deck below and was killed instantly. The sailors viewed this tragedy as confirmation of the curse. The ghost ship had claimed a life as payment for being seen. This incident cemented the reputation of the Flying Dutchman as a harbinger of doom, even in the skeptical late 19th century. The sighting by the future King of England gave the legend a credibility that it had never possessed before. It was no longer a story dismissed as the ramblings of drunkards, but a documented event in the history of the Royal Navy. Following the incident on the Bacchante, other ships in the squadron also reported seeing the strange red light. The HMS Cleopatra and the HMS Tourmalin both signaled that they had witnessed the phantom light at the same time. This corroboration from multiple independent sources makes the 1881 event one of the most compelling ghost sightings in history. The 20th century did not bring an end to the sightings of the cursed ship. In 1900, and 39 dozens of people on the beach at Glencairn near Cape Town witnessed a ship under full sail heading toward the shore. The observers noted that the ship looked archaic, with a design that belonged to a previous century. As the ship approached, the rock's certain disaster seemed imminent. But just before it would have run aground, the ship vanished into the mist. The sheer number of witnesses to this event made it difficult to dismiss as a mass hallucination or a trick of the light. Another terrifying encounter occurred during the Second World War. A German submarine crew operating in the Indian Ocean reported seeing a sailing ship that did not register on their sonar or radar. The vessel was glowing with an ethereal light and appeared to be moving against the wind. The German commander, accustomed to the mechanical realities of modern warfare, was deeply disturbed by the sight. He noted in his log that the ship seemed to belong to another world entirely. The crew of the submarine feared that the sighting signaled their own doom in the treacherous waters of the war-torn ocean. Scientific explanations have been offered to explain the phenomenon of the Flying Dutchman. Meteorologists suggest that the sightings are caused by fata morgana, which is a complex form of mirage. This optical illusion occurs when layers of air at different temperatures create a refracting lens that can make distant objects appear closer or distorted. A ship sailing far below the horizon could be projected into the sky, appearing to float in the air. This might explain the visual aspect of the ghost ship, but it fails to account for the accompanying sense of dread and the subsequent misfortunes reported by sailors. A fata morgana cannot explain the sounds of wailing crewmen or the sudden drops in temperature that accompany the sightings, nor can it explain the specific details of the glowing red sails or the rotten wood described by witnesses across centuries. The consistency of the descriptions suggests something more than a mere trick of the light. For the sailors who spend their lives on the unpredictable ocean, the Flying Dutchman represents the embodiment of their deepest fears. It is the fear of being lost at sea, forever denied a Christian burial, and separated from loved ones for eternity. The legend of Hendrik van der Decken also speaks to the human condition and the consequences of unchecked pride. Like the ancient Greek figures of Sisyphus or Prometheus, the captain is punished for his defiance of the natural and divine order. His refusal to submit to the power of the storm is a rejection of humility. In his arrogance, he believed he could conquer nature itself, and for that, he was removed from the natural cycle of life and death. The story serves as a grim warning that some forces in this universe are too powerful to be challenged by mortal men. The cursed captain's punishment extends beyond mere sailing. It includes the torture of hope. The legend states that every 7 years Hendrik van der Decken is permitted to go ashore for a brief period. If he can find a woman who will love him faithfully, he will be released from his curse. This element adds a tragic layer to the horror, as the captain has spent centuries searching for a salvation that remains perpetually out of reach. He returns to his ship time and again heartbroken and more furious than before, condemning his crew to another 7 years of hell. Those who claim to have seen the Flying Dutchman often report a profound psychological impact that lasts long after the ship has vanished. Sailors speak of a lingering depression and a sense of being watched by unseen eyes. Some have gone mad after the encounter, unable reconcile the reality of the ghost ship with their understanding of the world. The ocean, which was once their home, becomes a place of terror. They retire from the sea, moving as far inland as possible, hoping to escape the memory of the glowing red sails. The area around the Cape of Good Hope remains the epicenter of the legend. Modern sailors traversing this route still keep a wary eye on the horizon when the weather turns foul. Even with modern radar and satellite navigation, the primal fear of the unknown persists. The violent storms that plague the Cape are a constant reminder of the power that claimed Hendrik van der Decken. When the wind howls through the rigging of a modern container ship, it is easy to imagine it is the scream of the mad captain cursing his fate. There are whispers among the maritime community that the Flying Dutchman has changed its hunting grounds in recent years. Sightings have been reported in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, far from the Cape of Good Hope. Some believe that the curse has expanded, allowing the phantom ship to roam the entire globe in search of souls to torment. This expansion of the legend suggests that the evil of the Dutchman is growing stronger, fed by the fear of those who tell the story. The ocean is vast and empty, and there is ample room for a ghost ship to hide. The story of the Flying Dutchman has permeated popular culture, appearing in films and books and cartoons. However, these sanitized versions often strip the legend of its true horror. The real story is not a swashbuckling adventure, but a bleak tale of eternal damnation. It is about the smell of rotting flesh and the sound of screaming wind and the crushing weight of hopelessness. It is a story that should make you afraid to look out at the ocean at night, for fear of what might be looking back at you. Skeptics will always dismiss the Flying Dutchman as a myth born of rum and isolation. They analyze the atmospheric conditions and the psychology of sailors to explain away the sightings. But no amount of logic can comfort a sailor who has seen the red lights bearing down on them in a storm. The experience is visceral and undeniable. For those witnesses, the Flying Dutchman is as real as the deck beneath their feet and the salt spray on their faces. The ocean covers more than 70% of our planet, yet we know less about its depths than we do about the surface of the moon. It is a realm of darkness and mystery where the laws of land do not apply. In such a place, is it so hard to believe that the spirits of the damned might find a way to linger? The Flying Dutchman is a reminder that there are things in this world that defy explanation. It stands as a monument to the mysteries of the deep. As we consider the legend of Hendrik van der Decken, we must ask ourselves, what keeps the story alive? Is it simply a good yarn to spin around a campfire? Or does it tap into a primal truth? Perhaps it is the fear that our sins will follow us beyond the grave. The captain represents the part of us that refuses to let go, that refuses to admit defeat, even when the battle is lost. We fear him because we see a reflection of our own stubbornness in his hollow eyes. The crew of the Flying Dutchman deserves a moment of consideration as well. They are the collateral damage of their captain's hubris, bound to him by duty, and then by a curse they suffer alongside him for a crime they did not commit. Their silent toil and skeletal forms are a testament to the cruelty of their fate. They are trapped in a hierarchy of horror, unable to mutiny against a captain who cannot die. Their plight adds a layer of injustice to the terrifying tale. If you ever find yourself at sea sailing through a storm near the Cape of Good Hope, keep your eyes on the horizon. If the air turns cold and the wind carries the scent of sulfur, say a prayer for your soul. Do not look for the red lights, and do not listen for the sound of the captain's voice. If you see a ship with tattered sails glowing in the darkness, turn your eyes away. To acknowledge the Flying Dutchman is to invite the gaze of the damned. The legend persists because the sea is eternal and unchanging. The same waves that crashed against the hull of Hendrik van der Decken's ship in the 17th century are crashing against the shores today. The stage is set for his endless performance, and he plays his part with tragic consistency. As long as there are sailors to witness it, the Flying Dutchman will continue its lonely voyage. It is a ghost story that will never have an ending. In the end, the Flying Dutchman is more than a ship. It is a scar on the face of the ocean. It serves as a permanent warning to those who would challenge the might of nature and the will of God. The red glow on the horizon is not just a light. It is the burning fire of a hell that floats upon the water. So the next time you gaze out at the peaceful sea, remember that beneath the surface and within the mist, horrors await. And somewhere out there in the darkness, Hendrik van der Decken is still screaming into the wind. Many veteran sailors refuse to even speak the name of the ship while at sea for fear of summoning it. This superstition is deeply ingrained in maritime culture, passed down from master to apprentice for generations. They use euphemisms or simply gesture toward the horizon with a look of unease. This silence speaks volumes about the genuine fear that the legend inspires. It is a respect born of terror, a recognition that some names have power. There are unconfirmed reports from modern shipping lanes of radio interference and radar anomalies that coincide with visual sightings of old sailing vessels. While official reports often categorize these as equipment malfunctions, the crews involved often tell a different story off the record. They speak of static that sounds like human wailing and radar blips that move at impossible speeds. These modern electronic ghost stories suggest that the Flying Dutchman is adapting to the times, haunting the electromagnetic spectrum as well as the visual one. The psychological toll on the witnesses of the 1939 sighting was significant. Several of the beachgoers who saw the ship vanish before their eyes suffered from nightmares for years afterward. They described a feeling of overwhelming sadness emanating from the vessel, a psychic projection of the crew's eternal despair. This emotional residue suggests that the Flying Dutchman is not just a visual phenomenon, but a psychic event that scars the minds of those who perceive it. Consider the possibility that the Flying Dutchman is not alone. The ocean is a graveyard of millions of souls, and perhaps other phantom ships ply the dark waters. However, the Dutchman remains the king of these specters, the most powerful and the most dangerous. Its legend has swallowed up other lesser stories, becoming the archetype for all maritime hauntings. It is the alpha predator of the supernatural sea. As technology advances, we illuminate more of the world, chasing away the shadows where monsters used to hide. But the ocean remains vast and largely unmonitored at night. There are millions of square miles where a glowing ship could sail unseen by human eyes for decades. The Flying Dutchman does not need to be seen to exist. It only needs the ocean, the wind, and the curse. It is out there right now, sailing through the darkness, waiting for the next unfortunate soul to cross its path.